Hello. We are about to find out. Okay. It's not progressing. Okay. It says it's happening. Yay! Hurrah! Okay. Is that me? Okay. There must be a little bit of lag. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. It must not be live. So
that's what the thing is. It's buffering.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feed the buffer.
So turn off your sound.
The broadcast buffers.
There must be a little bit of lag. Okay. So Lauren, turn off your sound because it's going to rebroadcast that. Okay. All right. So sorry for the delay. Anybody who's following along, it looks like we don't have a lot of people following this live, but if you're following the recording after the fact, you can probably skip the first 5 minutes of us figuring out what was happening with the audio. Hopefully it's recording now and we can get started. So this is the third contributorship session of the instructor retreat. Isabel over in, I think it's either New Zealand or Australia, gave a session earlier today, and then Greg in the UK gave one in the middle of the day, and I'm the last one for today. And I do recommend, I think we each had slightly different ideas about what was important to cover. So each of the contributorship talks has covered and will cover slightly different material and information about contributing to software carpentry. So I definitely recommend looking at Isabel's talk. She talked about how to make really small changes without even needing to use like a terminal or Git interface, just doing everything on GitHub. And she goes into a bit more detail into how to build a new lesson, sort of using our sample lesson template. And Greg talked a lot about the sort of history of the lessons, how they're set up, why they look the way they do, potential changes that might be coming in the future, a little more about creating new lessons and what's important to think about when you do that. So what I'll be covering is sort of, if you're just coming in off the internet and you want to contribute, what is a path to contribution, and how actually then do you contribute something to one of the lessons. So probably for the first 10-15 minutes, I'll basically be touring through the data carpentry and software carpentry websites, sort of where you can poke around and look for lessons to contribute to and how that process works. And then for the second half of this session, I'll actually do a demo of contributing to a lesson by submitting a pull request. And I'll try to identify the main steps of that process and where, depending on your level of comfort with certain technical tools, you might be able to use an alternative instead. So feel free to take notes in the Etherpad that's associated with this Hangout if you're following along, and ask questions in the chat. I have some people in the room with me here at UW-Madison, and they can kind of get my attention if people ask questions, and maybe asking some questions themselves, depending how this goes. So to start, I'm going to look at data carpentry first. So I'm going to share my screen. I feel a little dodgy about that. Okay. So I'm sharing this particular window. Uh-oh, Vancouver can't hear either. Okay, 1 second, everyone. Trying to do some audio debugging in real time. So I'll just. There's a 40-second delay. Okay, so I'll move on because I think the audio is working in other sites, so it should be being recorded. And Vancouver, if you keep having problems, then just throw that into the chat, and some of the people in the room here can help you debug. So I'm first going to go through the data carpentry lessons that exist and how you might be able to contribute to their lesson material. So data carpentry is a little newer than software carpentry, so they have sort of fewer lessons developed and more that are in progress. And the development process for a set of data carpentry lessons so far has been for people who have interest around a particular topic to form a group who's interested in developing the lesson, to have a hackathon or two to sort of produce the bulk of the lesson material, and then edit and refine it after the fact, after maybe it's been taught once, and then contributions made. So there's sort of 3 levels then of stages of lesson development for data carpentry. And so if you go on their website to get involved, you can see help develop lessons. And so this has information about sort of their various lessons and what stages of development they're at. So active lessons, which is a little bit farther down the page, these are the lessons that have been developed through a couple hackathons, have been taught, and are basically ready to be edited from people who have actually taught them and want to suggest sort of small changes, make tweaks that'll help them be easier to teach, and that sort of thing. And if you click on the link just above, it goes to a GitHub page that is sort of their guide to contributing to those particular lessons. And if you go to the Data Carpentry GitHub page, so that's github.com/datacarpentry, these are mostly the ecology lessons, and if you search for ecology, you can find the different repositories where each piece of that lesson is stored, and then submit changes via a pull request, which is something I'll be going over in the second half of this session. So if you can also click on their lessons under development link. So these are lessons that aren't quite at the stage where they can be just sort of edited by anyone on GitHub with suggestions for improvement, but are still really in the development phase. So I talked to Tracy yesterday, and it sounds like they're interested in developing a lesson for social sciences and libraries, and that's at the stage where there hasn't even been a hackathon. They're just trying to get interest and people who might be interested in contributing. And so there's some contact points here. You could email any sort of data carpentry address, the discuss list, and contact them if you're interested in that. You could also throw your name into the Etherpad for this session, and we'll get that information to the data carpentry people so they know who's interested in working on those lessons. The geospatial or GIS data carpentry lessons are kind of at the second phase. They've had one hackathon, to start putting that lesson material together. So it's probably not quite at the teaching phase yet. And if you're interested in being part of sort of the next stage of development, possibly a second hackathon, I would, same thing, get in touch with the data carpentry folks, and they can get you in contact with the people who are leading that development and tell you how you can contribute. So before I sort of move on to finding software carpentry lessons to contribute, are there any questions about the data carpentry lesson development stream, or how to get involved, or anything like that? Okay, so I'll move on then to software carpentry and contributing to those lessons. And I won't go into detail. There's, as both Isabel and Greg talked about today, and this is true for data carpentry as well, is there's many different sort of levels of contribution to lessons. There's writing new lessons, there's sort of just commenting on issues with current lessons, there's actually making changes, there's suggesting changes, and those are all important parts of the contribution process. I'm not going to go into how to create new lessons very much in this particular session. Isabel's talk, the second half, had a great example of how you would actually do that using software carpentry's lesson material. And Greg in his session talked about kind of, if you're thinking about a new lesson, how would you go about getting started? And the short version of that is send it to the software carpentry discuss list, which is over here on the right, join the discussion. And this is the list you would want to use. But what I'm going to cover, I guess more specifically in this talk, is someone who maybe you've taught a workshop and you have some ideas for changes, or you're just reading through a lesson and you find a typo or something that you think could be written better, or you're just have some time, you'd like it to contribute to the lessons and you want to find something to work on. So if you're one of the first two people, you've taught a lesson and have some ideas for changes, or you just want a lesson to kind of read through and look at and offer feedback on, the lessons link, the website, has links to all of our main lessons right now. And to read, you can click on the site link, read through the sections you're interested in, and if you find something you'd like to change, then you can go ahead and make that contribution. You can also go to the repository for a particular lesson. If you have a suggestion and you don't necessarily want to contribute something right away, make the change yourself, you can file an issue by clicking on the issue tab on the right, and then the new issue button, and leave a comment on that. And go back to the software carpentry page. So those are all ways that you can sort of access the lesson materials, look at them, offer suggestions. And if you're not sure what you want to work on, and you're interested in just contributing anywhere, you can click on the Improve Our Lessons link on the right side here. And this has a list of all the open issues that other people have created on the various GitHub repositories for the lessons we teach. You can scan this, click on links if you're interested in actually reading what the issue is, and if it's something you'd be interested in contributing to. Either just contributing to the discussion or submitting a pull request that changes the text of the lesson. Okay. All right. So in my case, I'm going to kind of, that's the overview of the lessons that exist for both data carpentry and software carpentry, and where to go to either connect with the right people to contribute, or to open issues and make comments, or just to find material to work on. So I'm going to sort of move now into the demo piece of this session, and I'm going to work through the process of finding something to contribute, and then actually opening, submitting a pull request with my contribution to a lesson repository on GitHub. So the first scenario I'm going to do is I'm also teaching a SQL session later today, and so I have a potential improvement for the way that the installation instructions are written. So I'm going to go to Lessons on the Software Carpentry page. I'm going to go to the SQL repository. And then I'm going to go over to issues, because this is not something I have time to change right now, but I want to suggest it. And actually, so the issue that I have is the instructions for installing the database used in the lesson are not entirely clear. And it looks like someone else actually noticed this issue previously. So I'm going to check that. And yeah, Ranier had the same comment a little bit earlier this year. And it looks like he actually also has an open pull request addressing that development. So that's great. If there hadn't been an issue, I could have created one, and then someone else could submit the pull request. But I often find it's worth, if you have a concern, reading through the issue list, seeing if someone has already brought it up, and then maybe adding your own comments if you think you have something to add. And also checking pull requests to see if there's something open that addresses the issue you have in mind. So that's great. I don't have to really make any comments and contribute in that way. I might look at Ranier's pull request in a little bit and offer some comments if I like the way that he's addressed the problem that I noticed. But for now, I'm actually going to go back again to the Software Carpentry main page, go to the Improve Our Lessons tab, and this is where in real time or real life I would spend probably 10 minutes kind of glancing through the different repositories and seeing which issues I might want to work on that haven't already been addressed in a pull request. But because I did this last night, unless someone has like resolved it overnight, there was an issue about git clone not appearing. Yeah, here it is. And so this person had opened an issue. So their contribution was raising this question: the learning objective for the remotes in GitHub part of the lesson include clone a remote repository, but that's not actually in the text of the lesson. So looking at the pull request, doesn't look like this has been addressed yet. So that's going to be my sample for this demo, is looking at that issue, which I'm not going to be able to find again, and going through the process of submitting a pull request that adds some of that content to that particular lesson. Okay. So for those of you who already know how to submit pull requests in Git, you can probably, you can stop watching if you want. This will be less relevant to you. But for contributors who have limited Git experience or haven't submitted a pull request before, this part of the session is for you to demonstrate how you might do that. And so I will I do sort of assume that you have a basic understanding of Git, how to commit files and sort of generally what a repository is. But other than that, hopefully it will be clear what the steps need to be and how to submit a pull request, which is how we submit changes and contribute to the material here. So I'll explain a little more kind of how a pull request works after going through the first few steps of the process. Here we have the lesson repository. It's in the Software Carpentry space on GitHub, and it has all these pages with the lesson material that I say want to edit. And the one I want to edit is the part on GitHub. So this is what the file looks like. And so my first step is, I don't own this particular repository. It belongs to Software Carpentry. So I need to make my own copy on GitHub. So the way to do that is with this fork command on the top right corner of the screen. And I belong to a bunch of organizations on GitHub, but these are my changes. So I want to copy them to my particular namespace on GitHub. And so now we see on the top left hand, I'm in my own copy of the repository. And it shows where I got my copy from, but this copy belongs to me. And so I can make any changes I want. So what's going to happen in a pull request is I'm going to make changes here and then submit a pull request to the main repository. So I'm going to say to the main repository, look at the changes I've made, and if you like them, please bring them in. Please pull them in. Isabel, in her talk this morning, showed how to make changes in your copy of the repository within GitHub. So it is possible to click on these files and edit them directly through the GitHub interface. So if you're very much a beginner to Git, and especially if the changes you're making are small, that can be one way to contribute and make changes to the lesson material. But what I'm going to demo now is if you want to make changes by editing the files locally on your computer instead of through the GitHub interface, and how that process will work. So our first step is I'm going to open up my terminal. And I'm going to use a terminal interface to do this. If you have another tool to use that you use for Git commands, you should be able to translate what I'm doing here to the particular sort of appearance of the tool you might be using. So I'm going to go to my desktop, actually. Nope. And so the first step I want to do is make a copy of what I have in GitHub on my own computer. And the command to do that is git clone. You can just use the web address of your online copy of the repository. So I'll copy and paste this. Into the terminal. When I press enter, you can see that I now have this Git novice folder on my desktop. So it's created a copy of what I had online locally on my computer. Okay, so those two steps are pretty simple. The first two steps of submitting a pull request are basically making your own copies of the repository so you can edit them in ways that are simple for you. So I'm going to move into that directory. It has this repository. There are all my files. So it was cd git novice and then ls. And now I want to get ready to make my changes. So you could just make your changes and commit them, but I'm going to do the full workflow here. And right now, if I type a command called git branch, it shows me that I am on that the development of the repository is on what's called a branch called GH pages, and that's just basically a thread of development. This is the main version, I guess, of the material in this repository has been along this chain. And so I'm going to put my development on a separate branch. So it's going to branch off from this main GH pages so that it's separate, and then if it's approved, then it can be added in what's called a merge. So I'm adding information about clone. So the name of the branch that I'll use is add clone. It's helpful if these are somewhat descriptive. I sometimes go overboard and then can't remember what the branch name was. So I guess moderation in all things. So add clone is probably good. Should be pretty easy to remember. And then to actually switch to that branch, I'm going to do a checkout. So this is, I'm moving to that development history. And so now if I run git branch again, I can see that I'm actually on a slightly different branch of this repository. Okay, so the setup is now all done. I have my own copy of the repository on my computer, the lesson on my computer, and I have a place where I can make my changes. So I am going to open up the folder here. I'm going to open the text file in my text editor. Drag this down to the bottom. And now I just type in my changes. And this can be something that takes a few minutes, a few hours. It's something you do over a few days. It all depends on kind of what the contribution is you're making. Again, in real life, I would probably spend at least 20 to 30 minutes kind of typing up what I think the addition should be. Because this is a demo, I did that last night. So I'll be cutting and pasting in the changes that I'd like to make. So this is going to be a pretty big block of text. So it's possible that, in fact, it's very likely that there will be a lot of comments around this contribution, that it might not get approved, that someone might say, actually, we think we should do something slightly differently. But that hopefully this will be a starting point for discussion. So I've just added a bunch of lines, and I'll save the file, minimize my text editor, and now if I type git status, I can see the file that I changed. So before I commit my changes, I'm going to double check and make sure I'm on my development branch, which is less crucial now since we're doing everything at one time, but sometimes is worth checking if you've sort of gone away and come back. So now I'll use the normal git commit cycle of staging the file, committing it with a commit message, and then because I did these changes on my local computer, I want to send them up to my copy of this lesson that's on GitHub. I'm going to do that by using git push, and I'm going to double check the name of my remote repository. So this is the online copy that I basically downloaded this from, and it's origin, which is the default when you use git clone. So I can type git push, the name of my online copy that Git is using, which is origin, and then the name of this branch, which is add clone. And then I don't need to enter my password. So it's gone up. And so that's sort of, I guess, phase one is making your own copies of the repository, both on GitHub and locally. Phase two is creating local changes and then pushing that back up to your online copy. And then the final stage is submitting your pull request. So if I go back to my copy of the repository online, GitHub is actually really convenient this way. It noticed that I pushed a branch with changes. So I could just click this compare and pull request button. If you can also go over to pull requests, click new pull request. And the base fork is the name of the software carpentry repository. So this is the repository and branch you want to commit to. And then on the right is your copy and the branch with your changes. So you can see here a summary of the text I added. And if I click the green button again, I can add some comments about what I'm doing here. So I might mention that I created this PR as part of a demo. Probably needs further discussion. And I'm going to do something else actually when submitting this pull request. Because I made it in response to an issue, I'm going to open the issues for the software carpentry Git Novice repository. I'm going to go down to issues and try to find the issue that I was using. I can't, there we go, thank you. So that's this one, and I'm going to note its issue number, which is 176. And I'm going to add that note to my comment here. Okay, so click the green button again. And now on the software carpentry copy of the repository, I've submitted this pull request, which is a request to incorporate my changes, to pull in my changes. And you'll note that if I click on this, this has been created into a link back to the original issue, that a note has been added about the pull request that I submitted, so that if someone else looks at this issue, they can say, oh, someone else has already submitted something about this. I'll go take a look, hopefully offer some comments, some suggestions, and we can iterate towards the best change to this lesson that addresses the original issue. Okay, so I'll pause there. That was a little bit of a kind of command dump, and ask if anyone has any questions about pull requests, submitting pull requests with Git, navigating your way around the lessons, or that kind of thing before. I have one more short piece to the demo, but I want to catch up with everyone beforehand. Yeah, okay. So just as a heads up, I think the broadcast is 40 seconds? 40 seconds delayed. So I will see questions, I think, in real time in the Etherpad, but the response may be slightly delayed in terms of the video. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the Etherpad, so I'm going to hope that that was reasonably clear. Oh, this is a good question. Yeah, do all of the software carpentry, data carpentry lessons have contributing guides? And yes, that was something I meant to do and sort of blazed past. When you're ready to submit a pull request to a software carpentry, or I don't know if data carpentry has this on a per lesson basis, but it was linked to on their how to contribute page. So if you go to, if you went to their get involved, they have a document here, information on how to contribute, which is like their contribution instructions. And for software carpentry, all the software carpentry lesson repositories have a contributing.md file, which if you click on, gives sort of guidelines for contributing that I've hopefully followed. There's a link to this sort of pull request process in text form. So the process I just did is described in this link, and I edited only the markdown file. So that's the .md file of the lesson. The HTML files are generated by the people who maintain the lessons, so changes only need to be submitted to Markdown. And this also has links to the list of issues. Okay, so I've submitted my pull requests. That's great. So maybe I go away and I come back and I'm like, actually, I looked at this GitHub lesson page, and it would be great to have a challenge about cloning as well. It would be great to have a question at the end. And ooh, Daisy commented, we cover cloning in the next lesson. Ooh, okay. So then this pull request probably doesn't need to be merged, but I'll go ahead for sort of demonstration purposes. And if I wanted to add a challenge to this particular change, so I've added the content and I want to add a corresponding challenge, I could submit a new pull request, or I could add to this one. And this is something I feel like that is not always clear to people. And editing or changing a pull request, especially based on feedback that you've received in the comments of your pull request, is really pretty easy. If you've submitted a pull request once, you can edit one that you've submitted. So it just involves going back to your computer, going back to that repository, making sure you're on the same branch. So I use Git branch a lot when I'm doing this sort of pull request submission, because I want to make sure that I'm in the right place when I'm making changes and making commits. And so if I am on the branch that I used for this pull request, and I can double check because it'll actually be on the pull request page, I can just reopen the file that I had edited before. It's still going to have all of my other changes. And I can add what I want. So it looks like the challenges at the end have this particular formatting. So I'm going to add a title, this challenge markup, add my text, and then same as before, I'll save the file. Note that it's changed. Add it, submit it. And then it's really the same process. I'm just, before I pushed my changes to my copy on GitHub. So actually I'm going to run git remote again just to make sure. Yep. So I'm going to push my changes to my copy on GitHub. I'm still on the same branch, so I'm going to push the same branch. And I remember thinking this was a little confusing when I first started submitting pull requests, because the pull request is on the software carpentry copy of the lesson repository, but the changes are in my copy, and so that's why I need to still push them there, even though I've already submitted the pull request online. And then if I go back to where the pull request has been submitted and I refresh, GitHub actually recognizes that the branch has been updated and incorporates that into the page that you see. So one final thing I'll note is that if you're contributing even a small fix or something larger to a lesson for the first time, the process can take a little while of forking, cloning, doing all the repository management. But if there's a lesson that you know you want to be contributing to frequently, those first steps of making your own copies of the repository only need to happen once. And so, for example, I have a copy of the Shell Novice repository because I contribute a lot to that. And if you see, I think I only have one branch in it so far. But from here, it's easy to make new branch, make my changes, commit, and update. And I don't have to go through quite the same amount of setup. So, other questions? Yeah. Okay. All right, so we have a great question from, oh, I'm going to butcher the name, I'm sorry, Evgeny. And that is, after you've submitted pull request and changes have been made, how do you update your local copy? So if you've kind of, your contribution was a one and done and it was accepted, one alternative is to just clone the software carpentry repository itself separately. But if you already have a local copy that you want to update, so let me go back to my Novice. So, okay, what am I doing? Here I am. Okay, so right now it's only linked to my copy of the repository on GitHub. So if I want to incorporate changes from the sort of official software carpentry copy, I need to let my local copy know about it. And the way to do that is to add another remote. So right now I only have one, the one that belongs to me. But I can add another. You can actually add as many as you want, although I don't know why you would want to. And all I'll need to do is get the URL, the web address of the software carpentry Git Novice page. Give it a nickname. So I'll maybe do SWC. And then a link to the repository. And now if I look at my remotes again, a list of them, I see that I have two. So for most contributors, you can push to your own copy because it belongs to you, but you should not be able to push to the software carpentry copy because it's restricted. But you can pull down changes from the main software carpentry repository. Before pulling changes, ever, I always check what branch I'm on. Because remember, the authoritative branch was GH Pages, and I'm actually still on my sort of add clone branch. So before pulling anything, I want to go back to that original main branch. Then I can do a pull. So I'm pulling from the software carpentry remote now instead of mine, which is labeled origin. So this one is SWC. And then the GH Pages branch is the one I want because that's the main branch. This is already up to date because there haven't been any changes since I cloned it 20 minutes ago. But if it's been a while, there'll probably be several changes that get pulled down from the main repository. So it's a good question. Any other questions about sort of managing all these Git tools, contributing to lessons, any of the language I used that wasn't clear, so that I can clear it up now, and I'll wait for questions to come in if there's a little broadcast lag. Oh, yeah, I can do that. Yeah. Yeah. That's the only way to do it. I didn't know that. Okay, so okay, so oh, this is great. Okay, so Daniel is throwing into the chat on the Etherpad for this broadcast session a concept map that he's drawn to illustrate the process. If you Google this, you should be able to find at least a few diagrams. There are some helpful tutorials out there. So if anyone wants to throw those into the notes for this session, that would be great, so that we kind of have a list of resources for people who are new to this and maybe don't know where to get started. Mm-hmm. So, okay, so with that, I'm not seeing too many more questions from people. So yeah, definitely keep if you have concept maps or links or other tutorials that you think are helpful, throw those into the Etherpad, throw them into the chat. And just to recap, a lot of this particular session was kind of a live coding demo walkthrough of how to use Git how to submit pull requests specifically is what it was. But there's definitely more to contributing than that. There's commenting on other people's submissions. There's raising issues when you notice them. There's engaging in discussion, helping to design a new lesson if that's something that you feel really passionate about. And certainly, I know Git is not going to be something that's taught in data carpentry, so they're going to be looking for alternative ways for people to contribute if you aren't as familiar with Git and the whole pull request workflow. So I would say definitely don't be intimidated. The example that I just did was sort of the most complex that contribution needs to be in terms of submitting a pull request and doing so using the command line as your Git interface tool. So hopefully that demo is helpful for people who are at that stage and are comfortable with using those tools. And otherwise, if technology is a barrier to contribution, let us know. Like, put an issue on the lesson you want to contribute to. Send an email to the either software carpentry or data carpentry discussion lists, and let us know, because we'll get the best lessons and materials possible if we're able to get everybody's ideas, regardless of how Git savvy you are. And so we don't want that to be a barrier to contribution. Also, definitely check out the earlier contribution talks from today. Isabel had a nice intro to making changes just through the GitHub interface. So better for folks who are maybe a little less comfortable with the command line. She also explained how to create a new lesson, and Greg's session had some great info on why the lessons are the way they are, where they might be going in the future, and just some general thoughts on lesson development. So definitely check those out. So with that, I think we'll hang up. For those of you who are watching, thanks for watching along and offering comments and so on in the chat. And best wishes. Hopefully we'll see lots of pull requests in the future.